The spear came out of the trees without warning. Jim Elliot saw movement first. Shadows breaking from the green, feet pounding wet sand, bodies closing the distance fast. His hand hovered near the pistol at his side. He never drew it. That decision wasn't hesitation, it was obedience, decided long before this moment. 5 men stood on a narrow riverbank in the Ecuadorian jungle, fully aware they might not leave alive. What makes people ask, decades later, is not how they died, but why they chose not to fight back. Jim Elliot was not reckless. He was precise, intense, almost unsettling in his clarity. From a young age, he wrote obsessively in journals, wrestling with one question: if Christ is real, then what is a life actually for? By the time he reached college, Jim had options. He was intelligent, respected, disciplined. A future that promised comfort sat right in front of him. He turned it down, not because ambition was wrong, but because he believed obedience mattered more. While his peers planned careers, Jim studied unreached people groups, places no one wanted to go, cultures untouched, not because they were unreachable, but because they were dangerous. Then there was Elizabeth Howard, bright, faithful, and unafraid of hard questions. They first connected over Greek and Scripture, trading notes that soon became letters full of longing and shared conviction. Jim wrestled with the pull she created. Love, he feared, could be a distraction from calling, but with Elizabeth, it sharpened his focus. Their bond grew, not despite faith, but because of it. By the time he graduated, Jim carried more than a diploma. He carried a clarity of purpose. He would go where others would not. One name stayed with him, a tribe deep in the Ecuadorian jungle, isolated, feared, known for killing outsiders. Most called them savages. Jim didn't. He saw people who had never been given a chance to choose. When he arrived in Ecuador, the jungle pressed in on everything. The air buzzed constantly. Rain struck leaves like static. Jim didn't rush to speak. He listened, learned languages from scratch, sat quietly, paid attention. He married Elizabeth. They had a daughter. He knew exactly what was at stake. Family didn't soften his calling, it sharpened it. When he began preparing to contact the Waodani, nothing was rushed. Months of planning, flying low over the jungle, lowering gifts from a plane, tools, food, small signs of peace, a rope spinning, a bucket swaying in open air. And then, one day, it worked. 3 Waodani stepped out of the forest. Nervous laughter, shared food. One even climbed into the plane. For the first time, hope felt close, real, fragile, within reach. A few days later, Jim and 4 others landed on a narrow sandbar along the river. They called it Palm Beach. They built a small camp. They waited. The radio crackled back to their families. Calm voices, careful optimism. This could be the breakthrough. What they didn't know was what fear was doing deeper in the jungle. Rumors spreading, motives misunderstood, a lie taking root, that these outsiders were dangerous. On the morning of January 8th, the jungle went quiet. Jim noticed it immediately. The sudden absence of sound, the shift in the air, then movement. Men emerging from the trees, spears raised, faces set. This is the moment people struggle with. Jim carried a gun. They all did. They had talked about this exact scenario and made a vow. They would not kill people who had never heard the message they came to share. When the first spear flew, Jim didn't fire back. He shouted words they couldn't understand, not threats, not surrender, a greeting. The sounds came fast, feet, impact, water rushing past, carrying blood downstream. Within minutes, all 5 men were dead. Jim Elliot was 28. The world reacted with disbelief. Headlines questioned the logic, the faith, the cost. Why would God allow this? Why wouldn't they defend themselves? But the story didn't stop on that riverbank. Months later, Jim's wife Elizabeth walked into that same jungle, not with bitterness, not with vengeance, but with forgiveness. She lived among the Waodani, learned their language, shared meals with the very people who had killed her husband, and something unexpected happened. The violence stopped. The men listened. Some believed. Years later, one of the warriors involved in the attack helped baptize others in the same river where Jim had died. Jim once wrote, "When the time comes to die, make sure that all you have to do is die." For him, that moment came quickly, but the decision had been made long before, not on a beach, not in a jungle, but in quiet rooms, late nights, ink drying on journal pages no one else was meant to read. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. That wasn't a slogan. It was a life lived all the way to the moment the spear came out of the trees. Faith can cost everything. In our next story, one man is trapped in a Siberian labor camp and witnesses an impossible miracle. Click to watch Seventh Day Ox, Siberia's unbelievable prison miracle.